becoming the guardian at the gate. Most people believe their life is controlled by their decisions, but decisions are only the final act in a much deeper process. Long before we act, long before we decide, long before we even feel motivated or defeated, something else has already moved the pieces on the board. Images, words, sounds, stories, tiny fragments of information entering our minds every day. These fragments do not simply pass through us, they shape us. Every image we see, every headline we read, every video we watch, every conversation we listen to, plants something inside the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is not a passive observer. It is the architect of our behavior. Most people think habits are created through willpower, but the truth is darker than that. Habits are created through repetition of influence. Your mind becomes what it is exposed to repeatedly. Not what you want to become, not what you intend to become, what you expose yourself to. This is the secret battlefield that most people never even realize exists. Because the real war of life is not happening in your schedule. It is happening in your attention. Your attention is the gateway to your subconscious. And once something passes through that gate, it begins shaping your beliefs, your emotions, your energy, your habits, your future. This is why the most powerful forces in society are not the loudest. They are the ones that control the images and information that people see every day. Because whoever controls the flow of information controls the emotional climate of the population. And whoever controls the emotional climate controls behavior. Think about it. Why are certain stories repeated over and over? Why are certain images consistently placed in front of us? Why do certain messages appear again and again until they begin to feel normal? Because repetition does something powerful. Repetition bypasses logic. Repetition bypasses resistance. Repetition sinks into the subconscious until the mind eventually accepts it as truth, even if it was never true to begin with. This is why the world feels heavier than it used to. Why so many people feel tired without knowing why. Why motivation feels harder to find. Why distraction feels easier than discipline. Because most people are unknowingly feeding their minds with images that weaken them. Streams of information designed to keep attention scattered. Messages that quietly encourage comfort over growth. Entertainment that slowly numbs the desire to struggle for something meaningful. Little by little, the subconscious adapts. Energy drops, focus weakens, ambition fades, and eventually people begin to believe this lie. They begin to believe they are simply lazy, but they were never lazy. They were conditioned. Conditioned through the constant repetition of images and information that quietly shape their expectations of life. The mind is like soil. Whatever seeds are planted there repeatedly will grow. If the seeds are weakness, weakness grows. If the seeds are distraction, distraction grows. If the seeds are fear, fear grows. But if the seeds are strength, discipline, purpose, those grow too. This is why guarding the portal to your subconscious is one of the most powerful acts of defense a person can practice. Because your subconscious does not filter information the way your conscious mind does. It absorbs, it records, it builds emotional patterns from what it sees repeatedly. If your environment is filled with noise, chaos, and negativity, your internal world begins to mirror it. But if your environment is filled with strength, clarity, and discipline, your internal world becomes stronger. This is why some people seem unstoppable. It is not because they were born different. It is because they learned to protect the inputs that shape their mind. They choose carefully what they allow into their mental world. They understand something most people never stop to consider. The mind is always learning, even when you are not trying to learn. Even when you think you're simply relaxing, your subconscious is absorbing patterns, watching, recording, modeling behavior. This is why powerful ideas spread through images rather than arguments. Because the subconscious learns faster through visual stories and emotional experiences. When something makes you feel, it sticks. When something repeats often enough, it becomes familiar. And familiarity slowly becomes belief. Once belief is formed, behavior follows. This is how invisible influence shapes the world, not through force, but through exposure. This is why the strongest people in history have always guarded their mental environment with discipline. They understand that controlling their attention meant controlling their destiny. They did not allow random noise to shape their identity. They became creators of their mental world. And once you see this system, you cannot unsee it. You begin to notice patterns everywhere. You begin to see how certain narratives are repeated until they feel normal. You begin to see how emotional reactions are engineered through carefully placed images. You begin to see how distraction is constantly offered to prevent people from focusing long enough to build something meaningful. But this awareness is not meant to make you paranoid. It is meant to make you powerful. Because once you understand how influence works, you can reverse it. You can become intentional about what enters your mind. You can feed your subconscious with images of discipline instead of comfort, with ideas of growth instead of excuses, with stories of resilience instead of defeat. When you do this long enough, something extraordinary happens. Your emotional baseline begins to change. Your mind becomes sharper. Your motivation becomes steadier. Your habits begin to align with the information you feed yourself. Because the subconscious is still doing what it always did. It is building behavior from what it sees repeatedly. The difference is, now you are choosing the images. Now you are choosing the information. Now you are guarding the gate. And when you control the gate, you control direction of life. Most people will never realize this. They will continue allowing the world to pour random influence into their minds every day. But you are no longer blind to the mechanism. You see the battlefield of attention, the battlefield of influence, the battlefield of subconscious mind. And once a warrior sees the battlefield clearly, they no longer fight blindly. They fight strategically. So guard the portal. Choose carefully what enters your mind, because every image you consume, every story you believe, every message you repeat in your head is quietly shaping the person you will become. And the world will always try to influence you. But the strongest individuals understand one final truth. Influence is powerful, but your ability to be aware of what influences you is far greater.